Hello, Neil from Diagonal Move here, looking today at Until the Bitter End Tanks, a game which, as the name suggests, is the armoured combat version of Until the Bitter End, the squad-based tactical combat series that I've featured on and off over the channel in various videos that I've done. I've never done a dedicated video on one, but they have featured here and there on certain other videos, games to start when you first begin playing war games type videos. On the table in front of me, we do have what comes in the game when you print it off, having downloaded the files, and I will go through each of these in turn and highlight what you get when you want to print this game off at home. Unlike some of the other games in this print and play series that I've done, this game is only available print and play, and it's available from Matt White directly. There was a Kickstarter originally, and I got this when it was bundled in with the other games in the series and the game called The Road Chosen, which was another game by that designer. Matt White, of course, being the person who is also fronting the Matt White Wargaming YouTube channel, and also is, I believe, a professional wargame artist, and you'll see that quality of artwork all the way through this game. What do we get in this download then? Well, we have the rulebook, the scenario book. I don't have the front covers printed off in this particular case, but we do have the two rulebooks there. We have some counters, and then we have no less than 6 maps to play the game on. I'll look at each of these in turn. Before I do though, just a quick note to say that if you do enjoy this video, or it helps you in any way to decide whether this game is for you, please think about clicking like, subscribe, leaving a comment if you wish to. All that said then, let's jump over to the first of the components. Let's begin with a look at the counters, and the first thing that you see when you play this game, or indeed any of Matt White's games, is the quality of the artwork. It's just fantastic. It's got to be among the best wargame artwork in the business. It really does. Each of these individual tanks and other armoured vehicles is based on the actual tank itself, or the vehicle itself, and the counters, the artwork is just phenomenal, and is a clear reason why this game stands out amongst others, particularly those from sort of the self-published war game world. Really nice quality artwork throughout this entire game, and you could spend absolutely ages looking at each of these individual tanks and just marveling at how well represented they are on these counters. But we're not here just to look at the artwork, as good as it is. We need to actually have a look at the functionality of some of these counters. We do have a number of things listed on there. There's a couple of numbers in red, and then some paler, slightly more tricky to see numbers as well. That might be a result of the printing that I've done here, but there's definitely an element of that grey on white being slightly more tricky to read at a glance than some of the other numbers. But the counters themselves are nice and big. The differentiation between them is both a border of grey and green, depending on which side you're playing, whether you're playing the Germans or the Allies. And there's also very faintly there a little sort of insignia for the two sides, the American star and the German across there. So the counters are very nice indeed. Now there's not too many of them. There's only just 2 counter sheets in total, and the first one really is the one with the majority of the counters on. They are single-sided, I think. Yep, they are single-sided. So that's the first counter sheet. Here is some additional counters. Now this here says stretch goal extra armor counters. This was originally released through a Kickstarter, so there's a few extra units there to play around with, and again really cool pictures there on those counters. The remaining sheet is then the admin counters. Quite simplistic in terms of how they are created, but they certainly do the job exactly as you need them to do. And here we have functionality over form, I think, compared to the other counters. And Matt White's games always come with tons of counters, so I have absolutely no doubt that you have way more than you probably need from this single sheet of admin counters. But the beauty of print and play is if you don't have enough, you can always print some more. And here we have a few special rules specific to some of those counters. The maps in Until the Bitter End are also incredibly pleasing to the eye. They are on the simple side, but every single bush and hill is all hand drawn and really gives a nice feel for how the game is going to play. It's sufficiently detailed for everything to stand out, be really clear, but simple enough that it's not too cluttered, and it's just got this lovely feel to the whole map, and all of the maps are similar. I'm probably not going to show all the maps because there are 6 and they all are relatively simple. They have a 10 by about 15, 18-ish grid. There are 3 sections to each map, and you need to cut off the margin, and then there is a significant overlap between them as well. I think the overlap is probably 1 or 2 columns wide in each case, so the overall map will probably be about that big once it's fully made. But they're just lovely to look at, they really are, and I cannot get enough of the maps and the artwork in the games that come from the Matt White design studio. This map is a river map, and just to show you quickly a couple of the other maps and the other terrain in the game, we do have here more of a muddy swamp type terrain that you can sort of get a feel for there in terms of how it will look, and again there is some of that overlap between the sheets, and there is more open terrain here on this map. So hopefully this gives you a good sense of how the maps fit together and also what they look like when they're made, and you can just kind of imagine those armor counters rumbling across this terrain, can't you? It just looks really nice and clear and simple. There are 6 maps in total. There's another river one, another swampy one, and then another more countryside-y terrain one like this one. Hopefully that will give you a sense of the sort of map you're going to get inside this game. Those maps are very similar to the infantry version, but there are some armour specific rules, and let's go and have a look at the rulebook now. Here we have the rulebook and the scenario book. I'll go through each in turn. Both of them are roughly the same length, about 22 pages. Obviously I've printed double-sided, so it's somewhat less than that in terms of paper usage. But starting with the rulebook, it's fairly clear, fairly straightforward to see. This is a simple game, and the rules for both the 2-player version and the solo version are included. There's a nice summary of the of the counters that you'll see here right at the front of the rule book. It is a chip pull game, and you'll get a sense of how everything fits together as you go through these early pages. You have descriptions of the major components of the counters, and also some information about the orientation of the vehicles as you place them on those hex maps. Usefully, Matt does also have some videos on his YouTube channel that gives you all this information in a nice handy video format. We have, as we go through, some more information around the turn sequence for 2 players, including counter activation, the actions you can take, and all the different whys and wherefores of what the terrain will do to your armour as you move along. So if you have played any of the other Until the Bitter End games, you'll recognise this format very much as being similar to the infantry, but obviously with a few added bits and bobs to represent the armour. There aren't that many illustrations, but the rules themselves are nevertheless laid out quite well, and as I mentioned, each of the individual sections does have its own video, which is very, very useful. Now the cool thing about this series of games is you have the 2-player rules, and then you have the solitaire rules. Now the solitaire rules are essentially a separate rulebook that allow you to just print off the rules, for the solo game if you only want to play the solo game. So you don't have to print off all of this stuff unless you're planning on playing both the solo and the two-player game. It is a fully detailed AI system, depending on the board setup and so on, and what the board state is like at any particular time. Depends on what your AI will do. It's like a list of priorities. But as it says over on this side, the most important rule is that you kind of you don't try and game the system, essentially. And all of those rules around the player actions and also the AI actions are all here in this second section. So that is really helpful, having everything to one side like this and not just having a few solo rules chucked in at the back like so many games do. And that then is the rulebook. Jumping over to the scenario book, we have a similar format in that it's broken down both first the two-player scenarios and then the solo scenarios. Now there are a bunch of scenarios each side. The first scenario in both cases is an introduction to the system and to the game, and then you have a few scenarios that use sometimes a single map, sometimes maps combined, and you have all the information on them to do with the scenario, such as reinforcements, the length of the scenario, victory conditions, and so on. You do have, I think you usually have about 7 or 8 scenarios. Yeah, there are 7 scenarios, 8 scenarios even, in the two-player version of the game. And then those scenarios do have the solo version. So again, if you're never going to play it two-player, you can print out the solitaire, or the other way around if you never intend to play it solitaire, and it gives you the setup positions and so on. And these scenarios are the same, but with the AI controlling the opponent. Okay, that is everything you'll get inside a game of Until the Bitter End Tanks. I do enjoy this game. Hopefully I will share more details of the game with you as I make the game and begin to play the game properly. That's the end of this video though, and I will see you next time.